My mother sighed and said, "Stop seeking attention. You're ruining the party." While I was literally suffocating on the cold dining room floor, my father cruelly refused to call a medical rescue ambulance. But an outsider suddenly, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Lily Carter. I'm 25 years old, and for most of my life, I believed the easiest way to survive my family was to stay quiet. Not because I didn't have opinions, not because nothing ever hurt me, but because every time I spoke up, somehow I became the problem. So when my dad's birthday came around that Saturday evening, I did what I always did. I showed up early, tied my hair back, rolled up my sleeves, and started helping before anyone even had to ask. My parents' house already smelled like roasted chicken, fresh bread, and the apple pie my aunt insisted on bringing every year. Music drifted through the living room, while relatives wandered in carrying gifts and bottles of wine. My dad, Michael, was laughing louder than anyone else. My mom, Karen, was already directing traffic. "Lily, can you set out the serving bowls?" A minute later, "Lily, those napkins aren't folded evenly." Then, "Lily, don't leave fingerprints on the glasses." She never raised her voice. Honestly, I almost wished she would. Instead, everything came wrapped in those calm little corrections that somehow made me feel like I was always doing something wrong. "Sorry," I said automatically. She didn't even look up. "Just pay attention." That sentence had followed me for as long as I could remember. Across the kitchen, my older brother Ethan walked in carrying a tray of drinks. "Need a hand?" he asked. Before I could answer, Mom smiled at him. "No, sweetheart, just go enjoy yourself. Lily's got it." He shrugged. "If you say so." And just like that, he disappeared into the crowd while I stayed behind stacking plates. That wasn't unusual. Actually, none of it was. By the time the rest of the guests arrived, I'd already lost count of how many little jobs I'd done. Refill the ice, answer the door, take coats, clear empty bottles, bring out dessert plates. No one ordered me around in a cruel way. It was simply expected. Somewhere along the way, I'd become the reliable daughter. The one who handled things, the one who never complained, the one everyone assumed would say yes. Around 7 o'clock, the house was full. Laughter echoed from every room. Someone turned the music up. Kids were running through the hallway while my uncles argued about football near the television. I finally poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the kitchen counter for maybe 30 seconds. That was apparently enough. Mom walked past and glanced at me. "Could you wipe the dining table before dessert?" "Yeah, of course." She nodded once. "No, thank you. Just another task." As I grabbed a towel, I noticed someone watching the exchange. A guy I recognized but had only met once before. Noah. He was one of Ethan's longtime friends. He gave me a polite smile. "You've been working all night." I laughed softly. "I guess somebody has to." "You haven't even sat down." "I'm used to it." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but Ethan called his name from the living room. "Coming," Noah answered before looking back at me. "At least grab something to eat before it's all gone." "I will." I honestly meant it. I just never got around to it. Dinner came and went. People complimented my mom's cooking, even though I'd helped prepare half of it. Dad stood to thank everyone for coming. He talked about family, about how lucky he was, about making memories together. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. Because that's what everyone else was doing. Then dessert started. I was clearing the dinner plates while everyone else gathered around the cake. My aunt waved me over. "Lily, come get in the picture." "I'll be there in a second." I picked up 2 more plates first. Habit. Always finish the work before joining the fun. As I carried them toward the kitchen, something felt off. It was subtle. Just enough to make me slow down. My hands suddenly felt colder than they should have. I blinked a few times. Maybe I hadn't eaten enough. That happened sometimes. I set the plates down and reached for my water. The glass trembled slightly in my hand. I frowned. Weird. I took a slow breath. Or at least, I tried to. The room suddenly felt warmer. The music sounded farther away somehow. Someone in the dining room called out, "Everybody, let's make a toast." Glasses lifted into the air. People laughed. I straightened up, trying to ignore the strange tightness spreading across my chest. Then I took another breath. This one didn't come as easily. I stood there for another second, hoping the feeling would pass if I just stayed still. It didn't. The pressure in my chest tightened until every breath felt smaller than the last. I told myself I was probably overheated. There were more than 30 people packed into the house, and the kitchen had been running nonstop for hours. Maybe I just needed some fresh air. I slipped out the back door without saying anything. The cool evening air hit my face, and I grabbed the porch railing, trying to pull in one deep breath. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. "Come on," I whispered. I closed my eyes and counted my breaths the way I'd seen people do online. 1, 2, 3. It wasn't working. My fingers started tingling, then both hands. Inside, everyone was laughing. Someone had already started cutting my dad's birthday cake. I could hear people cheering as he made a joke before blowing out the candles. For a second, I thought about staying outside until dessert was over. If I disappeared for 10 minutes, would anyone even notice? I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I laughed quietly to myself. Of course. The patio door slid open. One of my cousins stepped outside carrying 2 empty soda cans. "Oh, hey Lily." "Hey. You okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just needed some air. It's getting crowded in there." "It really is." She nodded, tossed the cans into the recycling bin, and headed back inside without another question. That was it. One normal conversation. One easy lie. Somehow, saying "I'm fine" had become easier than telling the truth. I stayed outside another minute, hoping my breathing would settle. Instead, the dizziness got worse. I rubbed my chest. "Just go back inside," I muttered. "Don't make this a big deal." The words sounded exactly like something my mom had told me my entire life. I hated that I could still hear her voice even when she wasn't standing next to me. When I stepped back into the dining room, the warmth hit me all over again. The conversations blended together. The music sounded strangely muffled. People were laughing over slices of cake while my dad stood in the middle of the room thanking everyone for coming. Mom spotted me almost immediately. "There you are. I just needed—" She interrupted before I could finish. "Can you bring the coffee cups over? Everyone's waiting." I stared at her for a second. I wasn't even sure she'd noticed how pale I felt. "Mom, what? I don't feel—" A guest cut in before I could finish. "Karen, this cake is incredible." Mom smiled like a switch had been flipped. "Thank you. I'm so glad everyone likes it." Then she looked back at me. "The cups, Lily." "Okay." I reached for the stack anyway. Before I could lift them, Ethan walked by with a plate in one hand. "There you are," he laughed. "I thought you escaped Mom's chore list." "I wish." He grinned. "Good luck." Then he disappeared into another conversation without realizing I was barely keeping myself together. I picked up the cups. Halfway across the room, my vision blurred. The stack suddenly felt much heavier than it should have. I stopped walking before I dropped everything. One of my aunts noticed. "Lily, honey, are you all right?" Before I could answer, Mom spoke from across the table. "She's probably anxious again." She let out a small laugh. "You know how she gets." A few relatives exchanged awkward smiles. One uncle nodded. "Oh, anxiety. I've dealt with that before." Another guest shrugged. "She probably just needs a minute." Just like that, everyone accepted the explanation. Nobody asked me what I was actually feeling. I stood there listening to people describe my condition while I was standing right in front of them. My heartbeat was pounding so hard it almost drowned out the music. Way too fast. I pressed my hand against my chest. This wasn't normal. This didn't feel like every stressful day I'd ever pushed through. Across the room, Noah was watching me. Not staring. Watching. He wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes stayed on me even as everyone else turned back to their conversations. When our eyes met, he frowned. He set his plate down without taking another bite. Then he started walking toward me. At almost the exact same moment, my knees nearly gave out. I grabbed the back of a chair to keep myself standing. The cups rattled in my hands. "Lily?" Noah asked as he reached me. I opened my mouth. What is it?" I struggled to force the words out. "I can't." He leaned closer. "What?" "I can't breathe." Before Noah could say another word, my mother looked over, let out a long, exhausted sigh, and said, "Oh, Lily, stop seeking attention. You're ruining the party." Karen didn't even sound angry. She sounded tired. Like I'd interrupted something far more important than whatever was happening to me. "Oh, Lily," she sighed, "stop seeking attention. You're ruining the party." A few conversations nearby faded into uncomfortable silence. People looked at me, then at my mom. No one seemed sure how to react. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell everyone I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I couldn't even get enough air to finish a sentence. I'm not. The words barely came out. Noah stepped closer. He wasn't looking at my mom anymore. He was looking at me. "Lily, look at me," he said calmly. I tried. "You having trouble breathing?" I nodded. "Chest feels tight?" Another small nod. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the chair with both of them. Karen waved one hand dismissively. "She gets like this sometimes." Noah glanced up. "Gets like what?" "Anxious. It's happened before." "Not like this," he replied. Mom crossed her arms. "You've known her for what? An hour?" "We've known her for 25 years. Before Noah could answer, Dad finally walked over. Michael still had a smile on his face from talking with guests, but it disappeared the second he noticed everyone watching. "Lily," he said quietly, "can we not do this right now?" I stared at him. I honestly wasn't sure what he meant. People are getting uncomfortable. I looked around the room. Nobody looked uncomfortable because of me. They looked uncomfortable because nobody knew whether they were supposed to help or pretend nothing was happening. "I can't." I bent forward, trying to catch my breath. Dad lowered his voice. "Take a minute, go sit down." Noah shook his head. "She needs more than a chair." Karen let out another impatient sigh. "She's working herself up." "I am not," I whispered, though it barely sounded like my own voice. Noah crouched slightly so we were at eye level. "Lily, can you take a deep breath for me?" I tried. Nothing. He frowned. Again. I tried a second time. Still nothing. His expression changed. It wasn't panic. It was recognition. He looked back at my parents. "Has she been diagnosed with panic attacks before?" Karen answered immediately. "She's always been emotional." "That's not what I asked." Dad stepped in. "Look, she's under a lot of stress sometimes." "So, has a doctor ever evaluated her?" Neither of them answered. The silence lasted only a couple of seconds, but it said enough. I shifted my weight, hoping standing still would help. Instead, another wave of dizziness hit me. The room tilted. I reached for the serving table. My hand missed. A ceramic bowl slipped from my fingers. It crashed onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the dining room. Every conversation stopped. For a split second, all I could think was, great. Now I really had everyone's attention. Karen threw both hands into the air. Lily! I just cleaned that floor. I looked down at the broken pieces. I'm sorry. The apology came automatically. Even then. Even when I could barely breathe. Noah didn't even glance at the broken bowl. He caught my arm before I lost my balance completely. Forget the bowl. He turned back to my parents. Something is seriously wrong. Karen shook her head. She's overwhelmed, that's all. No. His voice stayed calm, but it became firmer. This isn't someone trying to get attention. He looked back at me. Lily, stay with me. I nodded weakly. He checked my breathing again, watching every shallow inhale. Then he asked something that caught me off guard. Are your hands tingling? I looked down. Yeah. Feeling lightheaded? Another nod. He exhaled slowly. My younger sister had panic attacks for years, he said, almost to himself. I've seen this before. Karen immediately responded. Then you should know she'll calm down in a few minutes. No, Noah said. I know panic attacks can become medical emergencies, especially when someone can't regulate their breathing. Dad frowned. So what are you saying? I'm saying she needs help. A couple of relatives exchanged worried looks. One of my aunts quietly picked up her phone, then hesitated when Karen glanced her way. It's okay, Mom said quickly. There's no need to make this bigger than it is. Noah stood up. There absolutely is. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. He looked directly at my father. Someone needs to call an ambulance. The room fell completely silent. No one reached for a phone. No one moved. The silence felt heavier than the tightness in my chest. People kept looking from Noah to my parents, waiting for someone in my family to take control of the situation. Instead, Mom folded her arms. She's going to be fine, she said. She just needs to calm down. Noah didn't back away. She's trying to calm down. She's had anxiety before. And right now she can't breathe. Dad let out a slow breath, clearly irritated that everyone's attention had shifted away from his birthday celebration. You're making this sound worse than it is. I'm responding to what I'm seeing, Noah answered. She's pale, she's shaking, she's struggling to speak, and she's barely getting any air. I wanted to say something, to tell them Noah wasn't exaggerating, but every breath felt like work. One of my aunts quietly stepped closer. Lily, sweetheart, do you want some water? I nodded out of habit. Noah gently stopped her. Not yet. She looked confused. I don't think water is the problem. A few relatives exchanged nervous glances. The room that had been full of laughter 10 minutes earlier now felt painfully awkward. Someone lowered the music. Another guest quietly led a couple of kids into the living room. Nobody wanted to leave. Nobody wanted to get involved either. Mom looked around at everyone watching. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid, she muttered. Noah looked at her in disbelief. What were you trying to avoid? A scene. I watched his expression change. Until then, he'd been patient. Now he looked genuinely frustrated. A scene? He repeated. Karen, your daughter needs help. My daughter gets overwhelmed. No, your daughter needs medical attention. Dad stepped between them. Let's not argue. I'm not arguing, Noah replied. I'm asking someone to call 911. We don't need an ambulance. How do you know that? Because she's breathing. I almost laughed. Except I couldn't. Each breath was shorter than the last. Noah crouched beside me again. Lily. I looked at him. Can you tell me your fingers are still tingling? I nodded. Dizzy? Another nod. He looked up at my parents. She's getting worse. Mom shook her head. You're feeding into it. He stood. No, what's making this worse is standing here debating while she's struggling to breathe. Dad rubbed his forehead. This is my birthday. The words hung in the air. I don't even think he realized he'd said them out loud. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Noah answered quietly. "And she's your daughter." I saw several relatives look away. Even Ethan stopped pretending nothing was happening. He'd been standing near the cake table this whole time, frozen between helping me and staying loyal to our parents. He walked over slowly. "Lily?" I looked at him. His face had changed. The joking older brother from earlier was gone. "You okay?" I tried to answer. Nothing came out except another shallow breath. He frowned. I've never seen her like this." Mom immediately replied, "Because you're overreacting now too." "No, Mom." He looked back at me. "She doesn't look okay." Dad sighed. "Ethan." "What?" "Don't encourage this." Ethan looked genuinely conflicted. He glanced at me, then at Noah, then back at our parents. It felt like he was trying to fit two completely different versions of reality together. The one he'd always been told, and the one standing right in front of him. Noah broke the silence. "If nobody else is calling, I will." He pulled his phone from his pocket. Mom took one quick step forward. "Please don't." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because people are already staring." He glanced around the room. "They're staring because your daughter needs help." Dad's jaw tightened. "This doesn't have to become public." Noah didn't lower his phone. It became an emergency the moment she couldn't breathe. For the first time all evening, Ethan made a decision before either of our parents could speak. "I'll do it." He pulled his own phone out. Mom turned toward him. "Ethan, seriously?" He hesitated for only a second. Then he dialed. The room stayed completely quiet while he spoke to the dispatcher. "Yeah. We need an ambulance." He paused, looking at me. "My sister. She's having trouble breathing." Listening to him describe what was happening felt strangely unreal, like everyone finally believed something was wrong, not because I had said it, because someone else had. That realization hurt almost as much as the pain in my chest. Noah knelt beside me again. "Good." He spoke softly this time. "They're coming." He helped me ease into a chair instead of trying to stay on my feet. "Slow breaths," he said. "I know it feels impossible, but stay with me." I focused on his voice, not because it magically fixed anything, because it was the first calm voice I'd heard all night. Across the room, Mom wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the guests. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying with an embarrassed smile. "This really isn't how tonight was supposed to end." Nobody answered. A few relatives quietly stepped aside to give the paramedics room. Others suddenly became very interested in cleaning the table or picking up the broken pieces of the serving bowl. Dad stood near the cake table with his hands in his pockets. He looked annoyed more than worried. Ethan hadn't moved. He kept glancing between me and our parents like he was trying to understand how everything had spiraled so fast. Noah stayed beside me until one of the paramedics gently touched his shoulder. "We'll take it from here." He nodded but didn't step far. "Please," Noah said. "She's been struggling to breathe for at least 20 minutes. Everyone thought it was anxiety, but this is different." The paramedic gave him a quick nod. "Thank you. That helps." Then he knelt beside me. "Hi, I'm Jason. Can you tell me your name?" "Lily." "Good. Stay with me, Lily." He clipped a pulse oximeter onto my finger while his partner wrapped a blood pressure cuff around my arm. "Can you take a slow breath for me?" "I'm trying." "I know you are." Unlike everyone else that night, he didn't tell me to calm down. He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He simply believed me. Jason looked toward Noah again. "Did she lose consciousness at all?" "No," Noah answered, "but she almost collapsed." Jason nodded and turned back to me. "We're going to take you to the hospital, okay?" I managed a small nod. He and his partner carefully helped me onto the stretcher. As they rolled me toward the front door, I caught pieces of quiet conversations around the room. I thought she was just stressed. She looked really pale. Maybe they should have called sooner. No one was whispering loud enough for my parents to hear. Or maybe they just didn't want to. Mom followed us to the doorway, smoothing the front of her blouse like she was trying to pull herself together before speaking. "I'll meet you at the hospital," she said. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm coming with you," just, "I'll meet you there." Dad stayed inside. He gave me a short nod from across the room but never walked over. The ambulance doors closed, shutting out the sound of the party. For the first time all evening. Everything was quiet. No loud music. No awkward conversations. No one debating whether I was actually sick. Just the steady hum of the engine and the soft beeping of the monitor beside me. Jason adjusted the oxygen mask over my face. "How's that?" "A little better." "Good." His voice stayed calm the entire time. "We're going to ask you a few questions. If you need a minute before answering, that's completely fine." I nodded. "When did the symptoms start?" "During my dad's birthday." "Were you doing anything physically demanding?" "I was helping set up, clean, serve." He made a few notes on a tablet. "Has anything like this happened before?" "I've been anxious, but not like this." I slowly shook my head. "No." He looked at me for a moment before asking another question. "Have you been under a lot of stress lately?" I almost laughed. Instead, I whispered, "I don't really know what not stressed feels like." He looked up from his notes. There was no judgment in his expression, only concern. The oxygen was finally helping enough that my thoughts stopped racing. Without meaning to, an old memory surfaced. I was 9 years old. I'd fallen off my bike in front of our house after hitting a crack in the sidewalk. My knee was scraped open, and I cried because it hurt. Mom walked outside, looked at my knee for maybe 2 seconds, then looked toward the front window. "We have company," she said. "Stop crying." I tried. I really did, but I was a little kid. "It doesn't hurt that bad," she added. "You're making too much noise." A minute later, Dad came outside. He barely looked at my knee. "You'll be fine." Then they both went back inside to entertain their guests. I stayed on the front steps alone until I stopped crying. Not because the pain was gone, because I didn't want anyone to hear me anymore. "Lily?" Jason's voice gently pulled me back. "You still with me?" "Yeah." "You drifted off for a second." "Sorry." He smiled kindly. "You don't have to apologize." Those words caught me off guard. I couldn't remember the last time someone had told me that. He finished writing a few more notes before looking back at me. "Lily." His tone became softer. "I want to ask you something." I nodded. "Has anyone ever taken your symptoms seriously before?" I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. My mouth opened, but I couldn't think of a single name. I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance. My mouth opened, but I couldn't think of a single name. Jason noticed my silence and didn't push me to answer. Instead, he gave me a small nod. "We're almost there," he said. "Just keep breathing with me." I focused on his voice until the ambulance finally slowed to a stop. The back doors opened, and cool night air rushed inside. Within seconds, I was being wheeled through the emergency entrance. Everything moved quickly, but unlike the chaos at my parents' house, nobody here seemed annoyed or impatient. A nurse leaned over with a reassuring smile. "You're safe. We're going to take good care of you." I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear those words until that moment. They transferred me onto a hospital bed and started asking basic questions. My name, my age, any allergies, any medical conditions. Nobody sighed when I needed a moment to answer. Nobody acted like I was wasting their time. A doctor introduced herself as Dr. Patel and pulled up a chair beside my bed. "How are you feeling now?" "Tired." "I imagine you are." She reviewed the report from the paramedics before asking gently, "What was going through your mind when your breathing became difficult?" I looked down at the blanket. I was trying not to make things worse. Worse for who? My family. She paused, wrote something down, then looked back at me. "Do you often feel responsible for keeping the peace?" A small laugh escaped me. "I guess I do." My breathing gradually became steadier while the examination continued. The shaking in my hands finally eased. For the first time that night, I felt like my body wasn't fighting itself anymore. A nurse returned with my phone. "It was in your bag." "Thank you." The screen lit up immediately. One unread message. "Mom." For a second, I hoped she'd ask if I was okay. Instead, it said, "Has everything calmed down now?" That was all. Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "What did the doctor say?" Just a question that made it sound like I'd interrupted the party instead of ending up in the emergency room. I locked my phone without replying. A soft knock came from the doorway. Noah stood there holding 2 paper cups from the hospital cafe. I wasn't sure if visitors were allowed yet. "They are." He walked in and placed 1 cup on the bedside table. "It's just tea." "Thanks." I figured coffee probably wasn't the best idea. We both laughed quietly. It only lasted a second, but it was the first normal moment I'd had all evening. "You didn't have to stay," I told him. "I know. So why did you?" He shrugged. "Because nobody should have to go through something like that alone." He said it so casually that it somehow meant even more. A few minutes later, Dr. Patel came back with my results. "The good news is your heart looks healthy." I finally exhaled. "But you experienced what appears to be a severe panic attack." "I've had anxiety before." "I believe you," she said. "But severe emotional stress over a long period of time can make panic attacks much more intense. Eventually, your body starts reacting as if it's constantly in danger." Every word felt painfully familiar. "I'm recommending follow-up therapy," she continued. I nodded. "I think I'd like that." She smiled before adding one last thing. "Recovery isn't just about managing anxiety." I looked at her. "It also depends on the environment you return to." She let the words settle. "People heal much better when they have a safe environment. One where they feel heard, supported, and believed." A safe environment. The phrase stayed with me long after she left the room. Because for the first time, I honestly wasn't sure if the place I'd always called home had ever been one. A safe environment. The words stayed in my head long after Dr. Patel left the room. I kept wondering why a doctor I'd known for less than an hour seemed to understand me better than the people I'd lived with my entire life. Noah took a sip of his tea and broke the silence. "So?" I looked over. "How's the tea?" I laughed quietly. "I haven't even tried it." "You should. I paid $3 for that tiny cup." I picked it up and took a careful sip. "It tastes like hot water pretending to be tea." He smiled. "That's exactly what I thought." For the first time all day, the conversation wasn't about my breathing, my parents, or the party. It was just normal. He asked about my job. I told him I worked as a graphic designer and usually worked from home. He admitted he'd only known me as Ethan's little sister. "I guess we never really talked before tonight," he said. "No, we didn't." "I wish we had." There wasn't anything flirtatious about it. Just honest. He looked down at his cup for a moment. "I'm sorry I didn't realize sooner." "You don't have to apologize." "I do." He shook his head. "I've been at your parents' house plenty of times. Looking back, I think I saw pieces of it." "Pieces of what?" "The way they brushed you off." I stayed quiet. I guess I told myself every family jokes differently. They weren't joking. I know that now. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt peaceful. Noah leaned back in his chair. You know what stood out to me tonight? What? The first thing you said wasn't, help me. I frowned. You kept saying, I'm sorry. I stared at my hands. He was right. Even when I could barely breathe, I'd apologized. I didn't even notice. I did. His voice stayed gentle. It made me wonder how many times you've apologized for things that weren't your fault. That question stayed with me, because I honestly didn't know the answer. A knock interrupted the quiet. Before either of us could respond, the door opened. Mom walked in first. Dad followed. Ethan came in last, closing the door behind him. Noah immediately stood. I can step outside if... No, I said. The word surprised all of us. You can stay. Mom forced a small smile. Well, you seem much better. I waited. Part of me expected her to say she was glad I was okay. Instead, she sighed. You have no idea how uncomfortable everything became after the ambulance left. Dad nodded. People kept asking questions. Mom looked exhausted. The whole party was ruined. I blinked. Ruined. That was the first thing she wanted to talk about? I'm sorry your father had to spend the rest of his birthday explaining what happened. There it was. Without thinking, I almost said the words that had come out of my mouth my entire life. I'm sorry. I could actually feel them sitting at the back of my throat. Then I remembered Jason telling me I didn't have to apologize. I remembered Dr. Patel talking about a safe environment for the first time. I didn't say it. The silence stretched across the room. Mom frowned. Aren't you going to say anything? Dad crossed his arms. We've all had a stressful night. I looked at them. So have I. Mom let out another sigh. We know that, Lily, but you have to understand how this looked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No, I said quietly. I don't. She looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? I mean, I couldn't breathe. Nobody answered. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. Still nothing. I was trying to ask for help. Mom shifted uncomfortably. You've always been emotional. The sentence landed exactly where it always had. Except this time. It didn't make me question myself. It made me remember. Every time I'd been told I was too sensitive. Every time I was called dramatic. Every time I apologized just to end the conversation. I looked directly at my parents. I need you to listen. They both stayed silent. I took one slow breath. Then, for the first time in my life, I stopped apologizing and started talking about everything I'd spent years pretending didn't hurt. I need you to listen. Nobody interrupted me this time, maybe because they weren't expecting me to keep going. I looked at my parents, then at Ethan. I've spent years thinking something was wrong with me. Mom frowned. Lily, don't be dramatic. There it is. What? That's exactly what I'm talking about. She opened her mouth, but I didn't stop. When I was a kid and I got hurt, I was told to stop crying because guests might hear me. Mom shook her head. Oh, come on, you were a child. Every parent says things like that. No, Mom, not every parent. Dad let out a tired sigh. You're digging up ancient history. I'm explaining why tonight hurt so much. He folded his arms. You had a panic attack. Nobody wanted that to happen. But nobody believed me when I said I couldn't breathe. We thought you were anxious. I was anxious, I replied. That didn't mean I wasn't in medical distress. Dad looked frustrated. We did call an ambulance. I looked at him for a long second. No. His eyebrows pulled together. Noah convinced you to. The room fell quiet. Nobody argued with that. Because it was true. I turned toward Ethan. You only called after Noah kept pushing. He looked down at the floor. He didn't finish the sentence. I wasn't trying to blame you, I said. But you looked at Mom and Dad before you looked at me. His shoulders dropped. I know. That was the first time anyone in my family had admitted even a small part of what happened. Mom immediately stepped in. Ethan, don't let her make you feel guilty. I'm not making him feel guilty. Yes, you are. No. I took a slow breath. I'm telling you what it felt like from where I was sitting. Mom rubbed her forehead. Lily, we've always done our best. I believe you think that. She blinked. But your best still hurt me. She stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. Dad's expression hardened. So now we're bad parents? I didn't say that. It's what you're implying. I looked at him. I'm saying that every time I tried to tell you something was wrong, I walked away feeling like I was the problem. Nobody answered. The silence lasted long enough that I started wondering if they were actually hearing me. Then Ethan spoke, quietly. I remember something. Everyone looked at him. He rubbed the back of his neck. There was a school play. I frowned. I forgot my lines. He nodded. You were crying backstage. A memory surfaced immediately. I was 10. Mom smiled awkwardly. You got over it. I shook my head. No. I looked at Ethan. Mom told me to stop crying because she didn't want people thinking I couldn't handle being on stage. His face slowly changed. I remember that. Dad spoke before Ethan could continue. Your mother was trying to encourage you. It didn't feel like encouragement. Mom sighed again. You always take everything personally. No. Ethan said quietly. All three of us turned toward him. He looked uncomfortable. I remember saying that too. Mom stared at him. What? I used to tease her whenever she got nervous. He looked at me. I thought we were joking. I gave him a sad smile. I know. And I never realized it stayed with you. I never told you. His face filled with regret. I'm sorry. The words caught me off guard, not because they fixed anything, but because they sounded genuine. Dad noticed the exchange and shook his head. This isn't helping. What do you mean? Ethan asked. We're turning one bad night into a trial. I couldn't believe he still saw this as just one night. It wasn't one night. I looked directly at him. It was years. A soft knock interrupted us. The door opened slowly. A nurse stepped inside carrying a clipboard. She paused almost immediately. Her eyes moved around the room. To me, to my parents, to Ethan, then to Noah, who had stayed quietly near the window the entire time. The atmosphere spoke for itself. The nurse offered a polite smile. Sorry to interrupt. She checked the monitor beside my bed before looking back at me. My name's Elena. Her voice was calm. Can I ask everyone for just a moment? Nobody moved. She looked at me again. This time, her expression became more serious. Lily. She spoke gently, carefully choosing each word. Do you feel safe with your family staying here? The room went completely still. Nobody spoke. Not Mom, not Dad, not Ethan, not even Noah. I looked at Elena, then at the people standing around my bed. For years, I would have answered automatically. I'm fine. It's okay. You don't have to worry. Those were the answers that kept everyone else comfortable, but they were never true. I swallowed hard. No. The word barely rose above a whisper. Even so, everyone heard it. Mom's eyes widened. What? I didn't look away. I don't feel safe. She laughed once, almost out of disbelief. Lily, we're your family. I know. So how can you possibly say that? Elena stepped forward before I could answer. Mrs. Carter, your daughter has the right to decide who stays in her room while she's receiving treatment. Dad's expression immediately hardened. This is ridiculous. It isn't, Elena replied calmly. Our first responsibility is our patient's well-being. We're not threatening her. No one said you were. She kept her voice even. But emotional safety matters too. Dad looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, another nurse appeared at the doorway, quietly waiting. Elena glanced toward her before looking back at my family. I'm going to ask you to give Lily some space. Mom looked at me one last time. I can't believe you'd do this. I almost apologized again. Almost. Instead, I stayed silent. Dad shook his head and walked out first. Mom followed, still muttering under her breath. Ethan lingered near the door. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I really am. I gave him a small nod. I know. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first conversation we'd ever had where neither of us pretended everything was fine. Once the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The room suddenly felt lighter. Not happier. Just quieter. Elena pulled a chair beside my bed. You did something very difficult. It doesn't feel difficult. What does it feel like? I thought about it. Wrong. She nodded as if she'd expected that answer. When people spend years putting everyone else's needs first, choosing themselves often feels selfish. I stared at my hands. That's exactly how it feels. It isn't selfish. It's unfamiliar. Those words stayed with me. About an hour later, another knock came at the door. This time, it was a hospital counselor named Rebecca. She introduced herself with a warm smile and sat across from me with a notebook resting on her lap. We don't have to solve everything tonight, she said. I just want to understand what life has been like for you. At first, I didn't know where to begin. Then the stories started coming. The birthday parties. The school play. Being called too sensitive. Being told to stop crying. Apologizing even when I was the one who got hurt. Rebecca listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped talking, she asked one simple question. Did anyone ever tell you those experiences were normal? I nodded. My family. And what do you think now? I looked toward the window. I don't know. She smiled gently. That's okay. She wrote 2 words on a blank sheet of paper. Emotional neglect. Then she wrote another. Gaslighting. I can't diagnose your family from one conversation, she said carefully. But I can tell you this. She slid the paper toward me. When someone's feelings are repeatedly dismissed or minimized, they often begin questioning their own reality. I felt my chest tighten again, not from panic, from recognition. I always thought I was just too emotional. What if you weren't? That question changed something inside me. Rebecca handed me another sheet of paper. I'd like you to write down a few things you want to remember when you leave here. It felt strange at first. Then the words started coming. I don't have to prove my pain for it to be real. I stared at the sentence for a moment before writing another. Feeling guilty doesn't always mean I've done something wrong. The third one took longer. Finally, I wrote, I don't have to stay where I'm constantly made to feel small. Rebecca read them quietly and smiled. I think that's a very good place to start. For the first time in a long while, I believed it might be. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Message after message filled the screen. Not one of them asked how I was feeling. Every single one wanted the same thing, for everything to go back to the way it had always been. Every single one wanted the same thing, for everything to go back to the way it had always been. I unlocked my phone and started scrolling. Mom, can we please stop making this bigger than it is? Dad, people keep asking questions. We need to clear this up. A message from one of my aunts. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Another from a cousin. Maybe you should just talk to them. Not one message asked how I was recovering. The conversation was already about fixing the family, not helping me. I set my phone down without replying. A few minutes later, Noah stopped by before heading to work. He noticed my expression immediately. Everything okay? I handed him my phone. He read through the messages quietly before giving it back. You don't have to answer them today. I know. But I feel guilty. He nodded. I figured you would. I looked at him. You did? When you've spent your whole life trying to keep everyone happy, saying nothing feels like doing something wrong. That sentence sounded painfully familiar. Rebecca stopped by later that morning for another session. I showed her the messages too. She read them carefully. "What do you notice?" she asked. "I don't know." She handed the phone back. "Read them again." I did. Slowly. This time I noticed something I hadn't before. None of the messages took responsibility. None of them said, "We should have believed you. We're sorry you were alone." Instead, they focused on embarrassment, reputation, getting things back to normal. Rebecca folded her hands. "A genuine apology acknowledges the harm that was done." She paused. "A manipulative apology focuses on ending the conflict as quickly as possible." I looked back at my screen. The difference suddenly felt obvious. "So, they want me to make everyone comfortable again." She nodded. "How does that make you feel?" "Tired?" She smiled softly. "That's an honest answer." Over the next couple of days, I started feeling physically stronger. The nurses encouraged me to walk short laps around the hallway. My breathing improved. I even managed to laugh with Noah over another terrible cup of hospital tea. Life didn't suddenly feel perfect, but it finally felt quieter. Then, just as I was getting ready for discharge paperwork, there was another knock at my door. Before I could answer, Mom walked in. Dad followed. Ethan came behind them. Noah, who had been sitting beside the window reading, immediately stood. "I thought visiting hours were over." Mom looked surprised to see him there. "We won't stay long." I looked toward the hallway. "I didn't know you were coming." "We wanted to surprise you," she said. It didn't feel like a pleasant surprise. Rebecca happened to be finishing notes in the corner of the room. She looked at me before saying anything. "Lily, would you like me to stay?" "Please." She quietly moved her chair closer. Mom sat down across from me. Her eyes were red. "I've had a lot of time to think." I waited. "I know things got out of hand." Another pause. "I just wanted your father's birthday to go well." Dad nodded in agreement. "Your mother works hard to keep this family together." I listened carefully. Still, no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened to me. Mom reached for my hand. "I've always tried to do what's best for this family." I gently pulled my hand back. "I believe that." Her face brightened for a second. "But doing what's best for the family can't always mean ignoring what happens to one person." The room grew quiet. Mom looked hurt. "I never ignored you." I held her gaze. "When I said I couldn't breathe?" She immediately interrupted. "We thought you were anxious." "I know. And we were scared too." I nodded slowly. "I believe you were." She looked relieved. Then I continued. "But the one who couldn't breathe that night?" I felt my voice shake, not from fear anymore, from finally saying the truth out loud. "Was me." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Mom looked at me like she was waiting for me to take my words back. Dad finally broke the silence. "So what now? You're going to punish us forever because one night went badly?" Rebecca answered before I could. "This isn't about one night." Dad frowned. "We're her family." "And she's also my patient," Rebecca said calmly. "She has the right to decide who she feels safe with." Mom shook her head. "You're filling her head with all this therapy talk." "No," I said quietly. "She's helping me hear my own voice." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I carried you for 9 months." "I know." "I sacrificed everything for you." "I know." "So how can you do this to me?" There it was again. Even now, the conversation had somehow become about her pain instead of mine. Ethan finally spoke. "Lily, I honestly didn't realize it had gotten this bad." "I know." He looked down. "I'm sorry I laughed at you before. I thought everyone was joking." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first one that admitted something real. "Thank you," I said. Mom stared at him. "So, you're taking her side?" "There aren't sides," Ethan replied. "She's telling us what happened." Dad stood up. "This family is falling apart." I shook my head. "It was already falling apart. We just pretended it wasn't." Mom stepped closer. "Come home. We'll fix this together." "I'm not coming home." "You're overreacting." "No." I kept my voice steady. "I'm protecting myself." She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "I need you to respect that." Instead, she kept insisting. Rebecca quietly stepped into the hallway. A minute later, hospital security came in. The officer spoke politely. "The patient has requested privacy," Dad argued. Mom cried. Eventually they left. Ethan paused at the door. "I'll call you. Whenever you're ready." "I'll let you know." He nodded and followed them out. The room felt strangely peaceful after that. Noah looked at me. "You okay?" I took a slow breath. "I think I'm finally starting to be." A few days later, I was discharged. Noah carried my bag to the car. "Ready?" I smiled. "Yeah." He wasn't driving me back to my parents' house. He was taking me to my apartment. For the first time, home meant a place where I didn't have to explain why I was hurting. Recovery wasn't easy. Therapy didn't erase years of damage. Some sessions left me emotionally drained. Some memories hurt even more once I stopped avoiding them. My family kept texting. "Let's move on." Families fight. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." A week later, Mom mailed me a handwritten letter. At first, I hoped things had changed, but most of the pages explained how overwhelmed she'd been, how stressful that night was for her, and why she'd reacted the way she did. Very little was about me. I folded the letter, put it away, and went to therapy instead of answering. Over time, I stopped waiting for my family to become different people before allowing myself to heal. I kept limited contact. Sometimes Ethan called. Sometimes I answered. Mom still crossed boundaries. Dad still avoided uncomfortable conversations. Not everything was fixed. Maybe it never would be. Months later, I walked out of another therapy session and paused outside the building. Without thinking, I took a deep breath. A real one. Not because someone reminded me, because I could. And I realized something. I wasn't trying to prove my pain was real anymore. I wasn't collecting evidence. I wasn't asking for permission to be believed. I got into my car and drove back to the place where I felt safe. That was enough. If you've ever felt like your pain was dismissed just to keep everyone else comfortable, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Do you think Lily made the right choice by keeping her family at a distance, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments and tell me what city you're watching from.